Math 100 Lesson 7-3, we are going to add and subtract rational expressions with like denominators, which means they are going to have the same denominator. So if we are asked to add 3x minus 2 divided by 5 plus 2x plus 12 divided by 5. Now, this is a rational expression because it is they're both fractions, and we're asked to add them. That's what a rational expression is, just fractions. So we are asked to add these two things. Now, notice that our denominators are the same. If the denominators are the same, you can just go ahead and add the numerators. So 3x minus 2 plus 2x plus 12. Now, I put that in parentheses because I know we're going to be subtracting in a moment, and it will matter. Okay, so we put it over the one denominator, right? So now we simplify the numerator. I no longer need those parentheses. If I distribute positive through, my signs do not change, which is why I said I don't need them anymore. So 2x and 3x gives me 5x. Negative 2 plus 12 gives me positive 10. And then I have 5 in my denominator. Now, you cannot put this in my math lab. From here, you must simplify. Okay? Now, in order to simplify, we have to use what we've learned in Chapter 6 about factoring. All right? So in order to simplify, we're going to use our factoring skills. The numerator has a greatest common factor of 5. So we factor that out. All right, I factored out the numerator. Okay, factor the numerator. So it had a greatest common factor of 5. I pull it out. Now, since I have a 5 in the numerator and the denominator, they divide to give me 1. So my answer here is x plus 2. You would have divided by 1, which would not be simplified, so we just leave it x plus 2. There we go. Okay, example number 2. So we're asked again to add two rational expressions. The good news is our denominators are the same. Since our denominators are the same, we can go ahead, transfer the denominator over once, and we add the numerators. All right. Now when I distribute this positive through there, it does not change the signs. Now in my numerator, that is not in descending order, so I'm going to put my numerator in descending order. And if you try to put this answer in my math lab, it is going to tell you you are wrong. Here's why. We must simplify. Now, on the last problem that we did, we simplified by factoring the numerator. Well, in this problem, we're going to factor both. We're going to factor the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so chapter 6, super important. All right, so that numerator, that is a trinomial. So I'm looking for two things that multiply to be positive 25, two things to add to be negative 10. You can do your factoring off to the side. In fact, I will do that off to the side. Okay, just to show you my work, which is what I will expect from you, is your work shown. Looking for two things that multiply to be A times C, two things that add to be B, and they are negative 5. If you like grouping, then do your grouping over to the side. So I'm finished factoring the numerator. I get x minus 5 and x minus 5. Now, we would typically write that as x minus 5 squared. We're trying to simplify, so I'm going to leave it multiplied by itself. The denominator, hopefully, you recognize is difference of squares. Okay, difference of squares. So, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 25 is 5. One gets a plus and one gets a minus. So, we have simplified, okay, not quite. Really all we've done right now is factored. We haven't actually simplified until we divide out any common factors. So I have an x minus 5 in the numerator and an x minus 5 in the denominator. Okay, those divide out to give me 1. So my solution would be x minus 5 divided by x plus 5. That is as simplified as it gets. So our factoring that we learned in chapter 6, we absolutely cannot do these without factoring. Okay, let's try another. All right, this time we are going to subtract. Okay, again, the good news, our denominators are the same. Right? So I can put it over one denominator and I subtract the numerators. Now, if you have not been putting parentheses like I was, now you're going to really mess up. You must have those parentheses around 11x minus 4. Here's why. Because now when I distribute that negative, it does change the signs. So I have 3x squared plus 4x minus 11x and plus 4. Combine my like terms in the numerator and I get negative 7x plus 4 divided by x minus 1. All right, now this is where we simplify. So I am going to factor that numerator. Okay, the denominator won't factor. So my numerator is a trinomial. I need it to multiply to give me 12, add to give me negative 7. So those numbers will be negative 3 and negative 4. I'm going to do this one faux fractions. My a value with the variable over one number I found. A value with the variable over the other number I found. Okay, we can simplify this one. All right, now if you did grouping, that's fine. Show your work off to the side. All right, so my numerator, my factors are x minus 1 times 3x minus 4. And my denominator, I still have that x minus 1. All right, so now we divide out common factors. There's an x minus 1 in the numerator and the denominator. That divides to give me 1. So I'm left with 3x minus 4 in the numerator divided by 1, which is 3x minus 4. All right. Okay, so we're asked to add this time, but I have a slight problem. My denominators are not the same. They're close, but they're not exactly the same. So when we were factoring in chapter 6, we learned that if factors look really close to the same, but they're not exactly the same, I could factor out a negative 1. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do right here. I am going to factor out negative 1 from just this denominator right here. Okay, I'm just factoring, so I'm not really changing anything except the way it looks. All right, when I factor out -1, then I am able to rewrite this as -7 plus x. Okay, which hopefully you remember. That means I can turn that around. Okay, -7 plus x is the same thing as x minus 7. All right, so we factored out that -1. Now, I don't want that -1 sitting down there. So what I'm going to do, okay, those two things together give me a minus. So really my problem now says x squared over x minus 7 minus 4x plus 21 over x minus 7. All right, because we factored out that -1. It's being multiplied, so positive times a negative gives me a negative. So this is actually my new problem. Okay, now my denominators are the same, and I can subtract the numerator. Make sure this 4x plus 21 is in parentheses, because now I must distribute that negative, and it does change both signs. Okay, once we get here, we definitely need to try to factor that numerator. Looking for two things that multiply to give me -21, but add to give me -4. All right, so those two things would be -7 and +3. I will do grouping. Make sure you show your factoring off to the side. Don't try to stick it in the middle of the problem. Once I get it factored, then I go plug it in over there in the problem. All right, so my numerator, my factors are x minus 7 and x plus 3. My denominator, still x minus 7. All right, now I have common factors in the numerator and denominator. They divide to give me 1. So my solution is x plus 3 divided by 1, which is just x plus 3. So the biggest thing I need you to understand is there are actually two things. The denominators must be the same, okay? And in this section they're going to be, except for, like here, we factored out a -1, and then we ended up with like denominators. Okay, great. The other thing I need you to make sure you're doing is when we are subtracting, you must have parentheses over here on that thing after the subtraction, because you are going to distribute, and you're going to have some sign errors if you don't have parentheses. All right? So that is really all there is to this section, adding and subtracting with like denominators. Our next section will have different denominators, and so that'll be a little bit extra step there. So I will see you for section 4.